Welcome to this explainer, everyone. If you've been spending your time eating your way through the incredible food scene and navigating the intense, bustling, concrete jungle of Guangzhou, you might feel like you've got a pretty good handle on what Guangdong Province is all about. But actually, scratch that. We're going to take a short trip away from that non-stop urban energy and head out into the lush, green, and wonderfully peaceful countryside of Kaiping. And let me tell you, it literally feels like stepping into a completely different world without ever crossing a provincial border.
But right here in the countryside is where we get hit with a massive visual shock. I mean, what on earth are European castles doing smack in the middle of rural Chinese rice fields? It's wild. Rising completely out of nowhere, right above traditional farming villages and green farmland, you suddenly discover these towering fortified structures that look like they belong in another country entirely. Honestly, maybe even another century. You've got ordinary agricultural work happening right next to these soaring stone beasts with Roman columns and Byzantine domes. It is a massive visual puzzle, and it absolutely demands an explanation.
Now, China has one of the world's absolute richest collections of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. We're talking about roughly 60 sites in total. That easily places it among the countries with the highest number of these historical treasures on the entire planet. But here's the kicker, and this is an amazing fact. Out of all those sites, Kaiping is actually Guangdong Province's one and only UNESCO World Heritage Site. Just one.
So, you've got to wonder, right? Why did this specific place earn that singular honor? Well, when you think of China's UNESCO sites, your mind probably jumps straight to those massive imperial projects built by emperors, the sweeping dynasties, the Great Wall, the Forbidden City, the Terracotta Army, the heavy hitters. But Kaiping offers something radically different. Instead of emperors, this unique spot earned its UNESCO badge by telling the grassroots story of everyday, ordinary villagers, people who were connected to the entire globe through massive waves of migration.
Scattered across these quiet, green fields is the staggering figure of 1,833 towers, known locally as Diaolou. 1,833. And what's truly mind-blowing isn't just the sheer number, but the speed at which they popped up. While a few of the earliest structures date back centuries, the vast majority of these towers were thrown up during a frantic, almost feverish building boom in just a tiny 20-year window, right between 1910 and 1930.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Architecture of Migration, a global fusion in stone. When you break down this bizarre yet somehow beautiful architectural mashup, it's just fascinating to see how all these disparate elements come together on a single tower. At the very top, you might spot a Byzantine-inspired dome that looks like somebody lifted it straight off a European church and dropped it here. Supporting that dome, heavy classical Roman or Western columns. Yet right alongside those imported ideas, you've got traditional Chinese decorative motifs. We're talking mythical Chinese phoenixes, protective stone lions, and red characters for double joy carved right next to Western-style arches. And because these towers were largely built using reinforced concrete, which was a super modern material back then, these builders essentially had a blank canvas. They had the total freedom to create whatever shapes they desired. These Diaolou are quite literally globalization carved into stone and brick.
Moving on to Section 2, Designing the Ultimate Fortress, Beauty Born from Danger.
So why build towering fortresses in a peaceful farming village to begin with? Well, originally, the earliest three-story towers were actually built just for survival against devastating river floods. When the waters inevitably rose, villagers would scramble up to the empty higher floors just to stay alive. But as political turmoil really started heating up in the early 20th century, the danger evolved. Big time. Those distant mountains backing the villages, they became the absolute perfect hiding spots for rampant bandit camps. So the Diaolou had to evolve too. They transformed into massive, sometimes 9-story fortified watchtowers. They acted as communal strongholds. Up to 20 different families would pool their money together to build one, with a dedicated room for each family to hide in during a raid. They went all out, mounting searchlights on the roofs and setting up nightly alarm gongs to warn the whole village the second they spotted bandits creeping down from the mountains.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer paranoia and honestly the defensive genius of these structures. Take a look at the intense, 3-layered defensive window systems they used. If you walk up to a window in one of these towers, the innermost layer is just standard glass, right? Simply there to stop the wind and rain. Okay, pretty normal. Then, the middle layer is made of heavy iron bars to keep burglars out. Still pretty standard. But that outermost layer? No way. That is a solid steel plate imported all the way from Germany, specifically designed with tiny firing slits so villagers could stop incoming bullets and actually shoot back.
But here's the crazy part.
The defenses started way before a bandit ever even reached those steel windows. The absolute outer ring of defense for these villages was a dense forest of thorny bamboo. And this wasn't just your average garden plant. This specific bamboo had a unique characteristic where the young shoots were incredibly hard and razor-sharp. It practically acted as nature's own barbed wire. It grew incredibly thick, strong, and densely packed, creating this natural, impenetrable barrier against enemy infiltration.
Which brings us to Section 3, The World Brought Home. How Villages Funded Fortresses.
Now you might be wondering, how on earth could poor rural farmers possibly afford imported German steel and these soaring 9-story concrete fortresses? Well, the answer lies in mass migration. Let's trace how this all builds up. Starting way back around the 1840s, villagers from Kaiping began leaving in droves for overseas labor. They crossed the ocean, heading mostly to North America and Australia, taking on grueling work on massive infrastructure projects like the transcontinental railways, or chasing fortunes in the gold rush. By the late 19th century, many of these overseas Chinese, who were known as Huajiao, were finding real tangible success. They opened grocery stores, they started trading businesses, and they accumulated serious wealth. Then, hitting that 1910s and 1920s window, they started sending all that hard-earned money back home. Or they returned themselves, buying up land and funding this incredible Diaolou construction boom to protect their families. And because these folks had gone out and seen the world, they literally brought the world back with them, sparing absolutely no expense. A perfect example is the famous Mingsha Tower in Zili Village. This one was funded by a guy named Fang Runwen, who made a literal fortune running a grocery business in Chicago. If you step inside these opulent towers, you're going to find stained colored glass shipped from Italy and intricate mechanical clocks from Germany. The structures themselves, built with British cement shipped through Hong Kong. You'll find 100-year-old imported Western bathtubs and flush toilets, which, for rural China at that time, was a totally mind-boggling luxury. They even built grand Western-style fireplaces. And, if you know anything about the sweltering, incredibly humid climate of Guangdong, a fireplace is completely and utterly unnecessary. But that wasn't the point. They were the ultimate status symbols, proving their international success.
When you stand inside one of these towers today, looking down at European tiles on the floor while standing next to a traditional Chinese ancestral shrine on the top level, you really start to grasp what you're looking at. As our source so beautifully puts it, these buildings are a testament to the sweat and freedom of ancestors who held families close while wandering far. These massive structures are quite literally the crystallized dreams of pioneers. They're little fragments of the wider world that these brave travelers saw, scooped up, and carried all the way back across the ocean just to protect and provide for the people they loved.
Which leaves us with this final, striking thought to mull over. Usually, we tend to think of history radiating out from the center, right? From emperors and grand capital cities making sweeping decrees. But the Diaolou of Kaiping completely flipped that script. They remind us that history doesn't always travel from the center outward. Sometimes, history starts in a small, low-lying farming village. Everyday people leave. They experience the vast, overwhelming scope of the globe. And then they come home. And what happens when they do? They bring the entire world with them. That is exactly why this tiny, completely unexpected corner of Guangdong so truly earned its place on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you with a newfound appreciation for the towering global villages of Kaiping.